All righty, we will be welcoming our first panel. Let's give it up for Angie, Joy, and Tiffani, y'all. All right. Well, I actually am going to start with something that we kind of saw a little bit there in the video. Angie, you know, the viaduct was huge. And so as y'all answer the first question, you'll just make sure, oh, there, see, look, that's amazing. Their titles are right there, right? So Angie, you know, when we talk about the viaduct being something that was removed and then it opened up so much more, tell us a little bit more about that, because it obviously was a part of the design in an intentional way.
Yeah, well, we talk a little bit about the history, and I'll just kind of take us back to how we got here from there. 2001 Nisqually earthquake, it damaged a lot of infrastructure on our waterfront. It damaged our Elliott Bay seawall, which forms the foundation of our entire waterfront. It damaged the Alaska Way Viaduct, thankfully. But we all, you know, we all knew we had to do something about the infrastructure that was damaged. And so through a whole series of conversations, it took a lot of political will, a lot of key civic leaders, a lot of really strong city leaders to come in with the decision really to demolish this viaduct and get rid of it. And really that gave us the opportunity to reimagine what our waterfront could be. But that decision was made back in 2009. There's a long history of work on this program. And so to be finally here and opening up the waterfront in all of its glory next year, it's just incredible.
Thanks so much for that. Joy, I'm going to come to you because Friends of Waterfront, I think many folks here may know, but I want to talk about the connection that y'all have really had in stewarding this project moving forward. Y'all have had to do a lot. I mean, y'all are involved in the construction and the design and community engagement. Tell us more about how Friends has really been helping to steward this entire project.
Yeah, the vision of this early planning group was that, you know, we have never had a downtown park, and there have been attempts to get a new urban downtown park, but this really was one that was going to be extraordinary for Seattle. What the early planning group, all the civic leaders knew is you need an independent nonprofit to be able to care for this place. So we are part of the fundraising and contributing to the build. We're a partner with the city. But part of that work when you build is you also need to bring people closer to the planning, community engagement, advocacy, and then piloting programming. So for any of you who've been on Pier 62, the first part of the park that opened in the throes of the pandemic, right, the fall of 2020, our staff really took seriously this notion, if you want to create a place of belonging, you really need to begin building partnership alongside community. So all of this co-curation and programming that's happened, nearly 200,000 people have come for our free programming on the pier, because as a reminder, those who are local, I came back a couple years ago, there was a lot of construction for a long time. So most people probably said, I mean, I've heard this, yeah, okay, I don't know where the road's gonna be, there's so much construction. So having a nonprofit, particularly alongside all of the range of partners, many who are on the screen, was we need to get locals to come back and get connected to this place. We want this place to be hyper-local. We want this place to be a place that people see themselves in. I mean, I came to the waterfront a lot as a kid in the 70s and 80s and loved it, but truthfully, I didn't come back a lot in my 20s, right? There had been a shift in terms of the experience, but what our city's really investing in is something different. This nonprofit is actually going to continue to make sure that the build and the intention of this investment will be lasting. So like Friends of the High Line in New York, like Friends of the Underline in Miami, there's a lot of lines, obviously, in all these things. You need an independent nonprofit that'll make sure that we're stewarding this place, but do it alongside community and continue to build the fundraising and the resources that will go back into the park. So that is our role, and our role is also to do that in partnership. We are a small but mighty team. Our team is amazing, but we do it because we trust community. We work closely with the City of Seattle, Seattle Center, all the range of community partners, because this is also about the renewal of our downtown. So as a nonprofit, that is going to be our continual role. A couple people said, what are you going to do when the park opens? Like, I'm going to lose my job. And I was like, do you know something I don't know? And the answer is our work is really beginning. So we're excited about what that looks like for the future.
Well, it's good to hear about the continual effort, because I think that for so many in community, that's a concern, right? Like, oh, once it's built, they will come. And it's like, no, there needs to be the constant programming, the constant connection to community. So I appreciate you sharing that. I want to remind you all, you see some question cards on your table. So if you want to ask a question, please, throughout the panel, we will have time after we talk here to answer your question. So I want to make sure y'all know those cards are there for your usage. Tiffani, when we think about how Seattle Center is so connected to this, so many know downtown for the Space Needle. It's the place to come. We're talking about, you know, this being the largest project since the World Fair. Tell us more about the intricacies of Seattle Center and the Waterfront Park.
Yeah, so I feel blessed enough to have been on this waterfront program for the last decade. So before the decision of really what does this look like, the role Seattle Center plays, we did a huge national search of peer parks of how do they operate? And thinking about the core elements that Seattle Center does well is programming and activation, public safety, and maintenance. And it's all there on their campus. And we really have taken that model and that pride of place that Seattle Center just does so well. And that's how we're integrating our waterfront operations model. So that we're integrating that programming activation, really sense of place and belonging, that Joy and Friends, and they're really championing all of that work. And we have our Seattle Center team that's coming in with the maintenance and the public safety side that really is honing up off of everything we've seen be successful for Seattle Center.
Yeah, I think so many of us probably experience that there's a connection here, right? If there are things and activations happening at Seattle Center and my family's already down here, hey, then let me come over to the park, what's going on there? And so that connection is important. Thanks for sharing that. Angie, when you think about the habitat here, I want to talk a bit about that because, you know, we definitely have marine life, there's marine science, there's things that are going on below the water surface, right? We may be seeing a lot of things on top, but how is this preserving that habitat? How are we being intentional about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the very first projects that we took on as a city is the replacement of the Elliott Bay seawall. And as part of the work we did there in terms of the design and the permitting and working with our all the different agencies who have to allow us to actually do the replacement of the seawall, we talked a lot about habitat enhancements and marine biology and how could we put back a seawall that actually improved the environment as opposed to in the original design just kind of we threw a wall up and didn't really care what was out there. And so through conversations with different biologists and marine experts, we designed a seawall, for instance, that has a light penetrating surface that runs along it. So when you're walking along the seawall and you see those little glass panels, those are actually letting light down below to the surface of the seawall itself. And that supports a whole network of marine species that supports salmon migration, for example. The beach, we just built a new habitat beach down at just south of Coleman Dock. And if you haven't been down there, you should definitely go down and experience that. But you know, it was one of the conversations we had with the scientists and the marine biologists who wanted to see more nature, you know, us connect more with nature, but also with the people of Seattle, the 10,000 people that we had engaged in the original design concepts. They wanted to be able to go down and touch the water. That's something we talked a lot about with people. And that habitat beach does just that. Same goes for Pier 62. We have this floating dock. You can get down, you can be one with the water and really experience Elliott Bay. So just a few. And then, you know, we have 1,000 new trees we're planting, 100,000 new plants on the waterfront. I know it's not super green right now, but patience. Plants take a minute to grow. You know, we have green stormwater infrastructure where we're treating all of the stormwater, 10,000 gallons a year before it goes out into the bay. That did not exist before. So we have a lot of different environmental improvements that we're making as part of this work.
100,000 plants. I mean, I'm excited to see it. I'll tell you, that's really impressive. Joy, we talk about the vision here. We talked about it a lot. There's a need for community connection and engagement, but Friends has been doing some engagements, and I want to talk about how vital those have been to make sure that people understand the accessibility of the waterfront during construction. Tell us a bit more about how, like, Pier 62 has been super active. I know I've been able to be at some of the parties. I hope y'all have. It's been a fun time. Tell us a bit more about the importance of that.
Yeah, I think the question that I think we need to ask ourselves is there are many public spaces, but the question is who belongs there. And I think there's a mantra, you build it, they will come, and you know it's a movie, Field of Dreams. But I think it's a false mantra because the question is who truly sees themselves in those spaces, who feels safe and who feels welcome, right? And we know there's a history of harm in our cities. There's a history of who has been included and who has not. Obviously, the waterfront has been a place of a lot of disconnection. It's also been a place of a lot of harm. There are communities in our city, indigenous communities were pushed out of Seattle on the waterfront. Chinese exclusion happened on our waterfront in the 1880s. And the Japanese American community that was going to prison camp during the war came along the waterfront. We need to hold all of those things, but the question when you actually think about a world-class urban downtown space is how do we make sure this place is hyper-local? And I think one of the approaches that a lot of nonprofit friends groups are taking is how to build relationships with communities so people who are local do come back and see themselves in it. Much of the work that we're doing alongside community and co-curation is it's really important to see people who look like you in public space because there's a signal that this is actually a space that I'm welcome in. And it doesn't just happen once, and it doesn't just happen twice. It happens because it becomes part of your DNA. And the city has very aligned values with us to the question of racial equity. How do we actually create extraordinary programs, which any of you who have been down there, they're programs that are truly hyper-local. And what we really believe is programs also need to be a reflection of our beautiful community, but they're also amazing places for visitors to also experience. So we're really honored to play that role. We're learning a lot as we're piloting. Obviously, we've only been on 62, and we'll have another 19 acres to figure out. But we particularly wanted people to come down during construction because the risk is spaces do not become place that people see themselves in once they open. And that is the work that we've been doing alongside community, which has really been the joy. So if you haven't been down there and you haven't seen our programs, it's the last couple weeks to do that. But that has really been something that as an organization, we're really committed to our work around racial equity.
Yeah, I can say that shout out to those who you've been partnering with because that need is being filled for so many folks who have been able to participate. And I want to come to you, Tiffani, because Seattle Center has to have a wide variety of programming in order to not only draw in visitors but those who are local. And so I want to kind of continue this with how you're doing that and maybe sharing lessons learned with Friends of Waterfront so that the activations of all of these park spaces can learn and be engaged in ways that Seattle Center's been able to be over all these years. Part of this is also legacy, and y'all have been upholding that to a certain degree as well. So tell us a bit about that and how y'all have been able to share that.
Yeah, so we're working, Seattle Center is working a lot with Friends, and we're continuing to dive in and what this relationship kind of looks like as more of the park opens and we're going beyond Pier 62. Festal and some of the other events that happen at Seattle Center that are really the cornerstones of what people experience at the center. The team is incredible that we have at Seattle Center, and they've leaned into how we can partner with Friends, how events can come from the waterfront and there be interconnection between the two of them, between Seattle Center and the waterfront. There's an abundance of lessons learned as you do this community building and these large scale events, and events that really invest in community. And the more that, we continue to work together, I think that just enriches both locations.
Yeah. I know for me, when I first got involved, I realized that, wow, why don't I bring my kids here? And it always felt like it was a space for tourism. And so the connection to locals and to programs that matter to me and my kids or my family was missing. And so I harp on this a little bit because there has to be a direct way that there's engagement, but then there's also the understanding that it's going to represent so many different culturally rooted approaches to programming. So I appreciate both of you sharing that. You want to say more?
Well, yeah, I was just thinking, when you think of Festal, and that's so ingrained in community that we have in Seattle that is not tourist-based, and that really is something that is celebrated at the center, and we really hope to be able to continue to bring partnerships and experiences like that to the waterfront.
Yeah, I think Festival Sanjata, I mean, I hear that a lot in like kind of Black communities and Pan-African communities. Festival Sanjata kind of has that same vibe and feel. You know, when people see themselves not only represented on stage, but they know people who are involved in the organizing of these events, it changes the game because it's no longer about something outside of me. It's like, oh wow, I'm connected to these organizers. I'm connected to the folks whose ideas are being actualized on these major platforms and stages, which I think is really vital. When we think about the city's approach, now this is major for the city of Seattle. And so I want to hear from you, Angie, about how the city is saying, look, we have a place to play here. We have a role in this, and we're taking it seriously. What are some of those ways that you really feel the city of Seattle is stepping up when it comes to this amazing construction and build out?
Yeah, well, as somebody, so I've been working on this program since
You were a child.
since I was a young
That's right,
child.
you were a teen.
No, you're literally like since 2012. So it's been a minute. My daughter's 13. I've been doing this for 13 years. But you know, one of the things we really tried to do is, in the focus of rebuilding the waterfront, is obviously to create these beautiful new spaces and new park elements that everybody can enjoy here very shortly, but also to restitch the city back into our downtown. That, you know, because the viaduct created this massive barrier between our downtown and our waterfront, we didn't really have that sense of restitching ourselves back together. So when you see the Overlook Walk and that connection between Pike Place Market and the waterfront, when you see some of the improvements we're making currently in Pioneer Square, you know, and Pike Pine and Union Street, so we're really focused a lot on the east-west connection piece of it to really try to enhance that connection between downtown and the waterfront. I'm super proud that Seattle Center, our partners at Seattle Center, were selected to maintain and care for and secure these spaces. They know how to do it. That is a new idea. Like, that's not something the city has done before, is to you know, dig deep within the city family and figure out which department is best to take care of these beautiful new assets. And I just want to say I'm really proud that the city was bold enough to bring that forward.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this is taking innovation, bold choices, bold thought, new ideas. And so, Joy, I want to come back to you in terms of the community engagement side. Centering community voice in the design, I know, was really so important for Friends of Waterfront, and y'all had opportunities to bring community voice in, to learn what did people want to see there. But you also were able to pair that with construction and design. I mean, already, you know, this big tank when it comes to the aquarium is something that I know a lot of people are just buzzing about. Tell us about that importance and why we had to have a pathway to ensure community voice was also a part of the design.
Yeah, I mean, I really give a lot of credit to many people in the room who were part of the civic leadership that really ensured that this process was very intentional in centering community for feedback. You want to design something that's relevant for community. I mean, you want to not design something, I mean, I think the double-decker highway, the viaduct, was a perfect example of what not to do, because if you want buy-in from community to a space you want people to use, that process takes longer, but it ultimately creates buy-in and people actually believing it's something that will be an asset that'll be used for generations. So I really acknowledge, I mean, I wasn't here at the time when that was happening, but I think it's really important to take feedback. So the beach is a perfect example of some of the feedback that came through the early design process, that people wanted to be able to touch the water, and they haven't been able to do that for 75 years. And so being in a downtown space and being able to have an intimate space to go to Habitat Beach, touch the water, people take their shoes off actually in the summer and have a really quiet moment, is an extraordinary thing to be able to do in a city. And I think there's a lot of those design elements that were kind of audacious and probably were maybe eventually not part of the early design, but you need people to we need imaginations, and we need to put our greatest ideas out there and then come to a place to basically, which is what we ended up with, an extraordinary 20-acre park. I think that needs to continue. Our cities are better when we listen to one another, and we're also better because we are allowing ourselves to be in conversation and in dialogue. City processes take a long time, and I say a lot about that, what it means to be a public-private partner, a nonprofit to the city of Seattle. But in the end, you're bringing community together for an input process that creates ownership. And and maybe you don't get your way, because we don't always get our way, but that you are actually, you still have a space to be heard. And I think that just will continue. This space will open in 25, World Cup's coming in 26, and then 27, we're gonna know how people are using this space. It'll keep evolving. And so when we talk a lot about why we wanted to bring the steering committee together across the city is we're gonna learn a lot about how people are coming back downtown, connecting to neighborhoods, connecting to Belltown, connecting to Pioneer Square, the CID, and going downtown, connecting into the Central District and coming back from Capitol Hill. We want the city to come back in an amazing way. And so we want to be sure that we're finding those ways to be able to have that loop back session, to be able to bring the best ideas forward. I think that matters a lot, and I think it's going to really matter on a project of this scale.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've seen that really works is providing opportunity for small businesses to be a part of this. And I know City of Seattle does this in a wide variety of ways. Now the Pier is doing this. A lot of communities do this. But Seattle Center has ways of doing this. And so y'all have people that come down there, are part of, amazing kind of vendor markets. Tell us about the importance that has meant to this Seattle Center as well in welcoming people to that space.
Love the question. My majority of focus with Seattle Center has to do with how we operate the waterfront space as a park with public safety and maintenance. And so there's an entire team at Seattle Center that leans into that space of being able to do pop-ups and different vendors and busking, and they are an incredible team. And I wish I could lean into some answers that they might give me, but that's not been my experience at Seattle Center, even though they do incredible work there.
Well, you know it's happening, so that's good to know. Before we open it up for audience questions, I want to make sure, do we have volunteers out there who are getting these questions from folks? So if you have them, okay, great. We want to make sure we're getting your questions. I want to leave it to y'all to just kind of share openly, why is this important? And what do you really want people to understand about all the work it's taken in these 15 years to get us to this point? I'll start with you, Angie.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, it's so important, I think, as a city and a set of communities to get together and really think big and bold at the very beginning. This opportunity to remove the viaduct and reconnect our city to its waterfront. This is one of the most uniquely beautiful waterfronts in the entire world. And I'm not biased, I truly mean that. And so it's just been, what does it mean to people to come down to a new waterfront, a new set of park spaces, enjoy it in different ways, whether you're at the beach, whether you're at Pier 62, listening to music and dancing, whether you're up at the Overlook Walk, looking out at the Salish Sea, looking south to the stadiums, the Mount Rainier views. I think it just means so much to me to be able to actually have been a part of this work and really sharing with the city and with people who come here to visit some of the most incredible spaces in the world, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Tiffani.
For me, having also just the opportunity to be with this program for so long and really stand by, when this all kind of started, guiding principle being a waterfront for all, and we really we're creating that waterfront for all. That's what I strive for every day, and how people experience and walk through this space. And I think we're doing that through community and engagement and outreach. We're doing that through our public safety. We're really putting the lens on of how do other people feel when they're in this space. How is that welcoming and inviting? How is that safe? And then it's got to be maintained well. And so people feel like they can come in and the space is going to be somewhere that they can be because it encompasses all that, which then becomes a waterfront for all. And we're continuing, like to Joy's point, listening to feedback. The full park opens next year, but we've been operating Pier 62 since 2020. And so we're already hearing feedback as these public spaces have been open and adapting. Like the design was very, very intentional. We were intentional as the city to make sure that we took community engagement seriously and really listened to what people wanted to see for the waterfront. And we continue to do that. We've adapted a lot in the last just even 4 years. So for me, this waterfront is for all. We're looking forward to continuing that guiding principle and legacy of how people experience the waterfront.
Thank you.
I think for me, I've lived in amazing cities. Seattle, I grew up in Seattle, and we're a bevy of extraordinary neighborhood parks. But we have not had a downtown park. And I think the audacity of the 10,000 people who've been part of this, my colleagues on the stage, many people in this room who have fought really hard for this. These are not easy projects, but if projects were easy, people wouldn't do them. And I think Seattle sometimes doesn't always dial up what we do. We bring so much innovation and we bring so much vision. And so being able to deliver on what is a world-class park for our local community to reconnect with one another, especially after pandemic, where we're more disconnected than ever. We don't need to talk about politics, but I think it is really important to create a space that is a place that people see themselves in who are local and people who no longer live in the city but come back to Seattle to remember the history of what this place was. We're a world-class city and we're gonna put ourselves on the map, and so I'm honored, like my colleagues, to be part of that. And making sure that it's a place where everyone actually feels that sense of belonging. That's true to our values in this area, and I think we're a model across the country for the kind of parks that we're creating and what we're doing here.
Well, thank y'all. Now we have some audience questions. Thank you, audience members, for writing your questions down. There's a question here for you, Joy. What's your definition of hyper-local? Are we talking radius, region, neighborhood, King County? Give us
yeah, it's a great
some more
question.
info on that.
I think the way that we describe that is that you're seeing a reflection of actually local residents in the programming that we're doing, in our small business activations, in who is actually coming to the space. So I know when I travel, I like to go to places that are local because I want to actually get a view of what that experience is like. Because this is going to be such a regional destination, we're excited about people coming from across King County and also adjacent counties. Because there's a lot to rediscover downtown, and what we're wanting to do is really invite people to rediscover the experience of being back downtown. Many people haven't come back since before the pandemic. But I'd also say people weren't making it a destination, right? Things have changed in the region. And so part of keeping it hyper-local is making sure that we're true to the ideas and the values of bringing local people into the space, activating it, programming it, investing in people who are local, so that of the 15 million people who are coming to the park, we're seeing a reflection of people who live here. Tourists are going to come because it's going to be extraordinary, but that's also the balance of making sure that locals feel that sense of investment in place.
All right, this is another great question here from Noah. Thank you, Noah. I'll open this up because I think you may be able to answer this one, but how can waterfront businesses get involved and contribute to community activations?
Would you like me to answer that?
Is that for me? Is that for you?
Oh, I can answer that. Do you want me to answer that?
Go ahead.
I think one of the steps, and one of the many steps of this space evolving, is how we create opportunities for small business who have really carried a heavy weight of years of construction, both of the park and the seawall, right? And so it's a real recognition of the Seattle Historic Waterfront Association and those that are along the waterfront and downtown who've really felt the impact of that, let alone pandemic. So we're open to actually partnerships as a lead up to grand opening season, which is 2025, but also any ideas that people really have to be able to help market people coming down to the waterfront. So Noah, wherever you are, find the Friends table and be in touch with us. This is really this next iteration of partnerships with business. You know, we want the small businesses and businesses downtown on the waterfront to be successful as much as we want small incubation businesses from across the city to be able to bring a texture of new experience. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, y'all got some good questions in here,
They're
and
really
you're
good
making it hard for me to choose. This next question here is, can you please elaborate on what transportation improvements are being developed?
Ooh, that was a good one. So I'm a civil engineer, so transportation is my thing. Yeah, so we talk a lot about the park. We talk a lot about the park spaces, but hard to get away from the fact that Alaskan Way is a multimodal transportation hub, right? So we have Coleman Dock with the ferry terminal, which is all brand new, opened last year. We've really been conscious about making sure when we think about accessible connections, making sure that we're providing people with a very clear vision about how to get transit, how to get around downtown from the waterfront, how to get to the waterfront from other areas of the waterfront. We're building 3 miles of bike facilities. And I know people are excited about that because I keep getting people asking me when it's opening. But 3 miles of bike facilities. So, creating a greener, more accessible Seattle is what we're all about. These wide open spaces on the promenade for pedestrians to access. We do have vehicular traffic on the waterfront. 2 lanes each direction for the majority of the width of the length of the waterfront. And then in the south end, we have a little bit wider lanes because we're accommodating bus traffic that takes you to and from Southwest King County and to downtown. So really important, critical connection for all of us West Seattleites and other folks from Southwest Seattle. But yeah, we've spent a lot of money, time, and energy creating a transportation network that is more accessible, but also more green, and really tried to focus on the multimodal improvements and encouraging people to get out of their cars and use other modes of transportation.
Well, I think we've heard too, some folks are asking how can they be involved in programming. Sounds like y'all have the booth. Please connect with Friends of Waterfront at their booth. And lastly, this question here is I'm a little bit gonna add to this because I definitely wanted to know, and I agree. Folks are wondering if only local entertainment is being booked for future opportunities, or as so many of us experience the amazing concerts on the pier, right? Will we be also getting some, international entertainment down here at our pier?
Thanks for the tee up. So when the full park opens, whoever that was in the audience, thank you. We're going to be moving towards also park rentals. Part of the work of Friends, all of the dollars that we raise go back into the park. And so park rentals will be a big part of that. Pier 62, Pier 58 are the largest venues in that space. And so we will be assessing, obviously, I'm looking at Eldon, our COO, and Michael Johnson, who's somewhere, our park experience director, of looking at those who actually want to utilize the park as a venue for extraordinary programming. I mean, to Tiffany's point, there's a lot of venues in the city, so we don't want Waterfront Park to be the only place. This is about all rising tides lifting all boats across the city. We have extraordinary venues, but we may be creating, new traditions of concerts, of activations that are happening on the waterfront, because it will be sort of a quintessential space where people want to gather.
Yes, it definitely will, and we can see that from the designs. Let's give it up for our panel, all of our panelists, y'all. Thank y'all so much. Thanks so much for your work. Thank you.